It's time for world politics, and already there are a lot of political things that people are talking about, including things that are happening in the West Coast, the East Coast, and a number of other places as well, including some that are on the global community also. So definitely a lot of folks are hoping that 2025 will be a better year than 2024. And I know that one of my guests, Jim Eat, is all about freedom and even things dealing around getting over addiction and things along those lines. And definitely, hopefully, we'll see a better world in 2025, even though we've got new leaders coming in, some that are autocrats and all along those lines. But I have heard a couple people tell me they feel that 2025 might be a year filled of positive energy, even though we know that there's been a lot of incidents going on that might not give people that good feeling of a beginning of a year, since we know that there have already been crimes committed as well as some horrendous crimes. The Sugar Bowl is actually currently going on. Last time I checked the score, it was 0-0 and all along those lines, and that was between Georgia and Notre Dame. So there are fans in there, and they're trying to get that fourth team into the playoff system. So this will get them down to the semifinals. Then next week they'll cure it down or pare it down to two more teams, and then they'll have the finals, and then we'll have a national championship, much in the way that they do college basketball. Only in this case, I think it was, I forgot the amount of teams. I think it was like 16 or something like that. I have to remember how many teams there were and all along those lines. And of course, there was that incident that took place at Trump Towers as well. And like I said, in the morning news, there were a number of other things that were going on as well. And of course, even though we like to hear of positive news going on in the world, there's negative news going on also. Virgin Australia crew members allegedly sexually assaulted and robbed in Fiji. So a suspect was questioned over the alleged sexual assault of Virgin Australia flight crew member in Fiji, and all along those lines. And of course, we've got Elon Musk drawing the ire of certain politicians, not just here in the United States, but around the world, because apparently some of the West Germans and the German folks are not all that pleased with what he's doing in terms of backing the far right party and all along those lines. And of course, in South Korea, we've got a impeached president that is trying to see what's going to go on in his case and all along those lines. And apparently in the Netherlands, the Dutch Project reveals the name of 425,000 folks that were probably involved in terms of being World War II Nazi collaborators. So Netherlands is to open the archive on people accused of wartime Nazi collaboration. So it looks like they're going to be unmasking thousands of Nazi collaborators after 80 years. So sometimes the wheels of justice can move slowly, and we all know that as well. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on in that case. I want to say that even in the case with the Medgar Evers case, some of the people that were involved in that case in the last year or two were only recently found guilty, and I think that they were in the latter parts of their life. I'm not even sure if that particular gentleman is still living and all in that space. And then, of course, we know a lot of people will be honoring the late, great Jimmy Carter and all along those lines, since Jimmy Carter recently passed away, and his funeral, I believe, is set for the well, I know they're going to show his body first in the Washington, D.C. area, and I think that might be this weekend, but the funeral, I think, is on the 9th of January, if I am remembering correctly, and all along those lines. But definitely a lot of people are thinking about a lot of things going on. So I've got you here, I've got Rick Rosner, of course, I've got Sasha over there from Canada as well. But what is our thoughts around the notion of Jimmy Carter and just what's going on in the world? So I'll talk with you, Jim, since I've already heard from Rick and Sasha to some degree. But how are you feeling about 2025 and the hopes of the politics of 2025?
Well, my stance on the 2025 and the politics is that I will be in witness mode, and I'll just wait and see, because sometimes your expectations don't come to bear. And right now I'm tending towards the worst case scenarios, and I've had the worst case scenario in mind, and it almost never happens. So it's pointed. It just seems to me to be fruitless to worry, to have anxiety about what the future might hold. It'll unfold, and it'll be what it is, and we'll adapt. I think we're going to be okay. I see Rick's hand is up.
Yeah, Rick.
Pass the baton.
Well, just in his first time as president, Trump tripped over his own dick a lot. And it looks like he's doing some dick tripping now. So, yeah, worst case is, I agree with Jim, pretty unlikely. Though I'm not as good as he is at calming myself.
Yeah,
the first administration, I was anything but calm.
I wasn't calm that first time either, but yeah, we had that attitude of a wait and see attitude, and hopefully, like you, Jim, hoping it'll be better. Sasha, I had a question for you because you served in the Russian military a long time ago and everything, and you definitely are of Ukrainian descent. And I mentioned that the Danish are now going after the Nazi collaborators, and I mentioned the folks that were involved in Medgar Evers' case, and there are a number of other cases as well. Does these military tribunals ever really bring justice? Because a lot of times it seems like by the time they get to the people, they are either not living, because I imagine if it's 80 years later, a lot of these people are not living, or they're not able to have true justice brought to them and everything like that. So I'm just wondering your take on that, because I want to say, somebody, Rick, you can look it up for me because I don't feel like doing it right now, but I want to say that the person that they convicted in the Medgar Evers case, they did get convicted, but I think they may have passed away in jail or something like that and everything. But I was just wondering, does these trials, since they take so long, and even I'm thinking, even if Putin gets convicted, and he's already been convicted, will he ever be found any justice for him and everything like that?
I think it's a hypothetical question. It's a more judicial procedure question. So I don't want to comment on that, especially that I'm not that familiar. I was not digging in Aruba. They never discussed that topic, and so I missed it quite a bit. But I would like to address this administration questions. By the way, I was serving in a Soviet army, not in the Russian army. Okay, that's a small detail. Now, my expectation of this administration, it will bomb in a spectacular way. It will incapacitate itself from running the country, the army, the foreign policies, even the domestic policy. It will bomb in a spectacular, never heard of way. And I expect that to be very, very soon, because Trump, see, one thing is to win election and another one is to govern. To win election, he made a whole bunch of incredible promises, such as one day that he will need to have a peace in Ukraine and Russia. By many experts' opinion, the war will last well into 2026. Wake up! Stop dreaming! Ukraine is now very quiet about Trump's plan because Ukraine is depending on the U.S. help, and including the weapons or so on. So they're quiet. They know that it will be eventually Putin who will derail any peaceful protest. So Ukraine will be like, well, they agreed. They didn't say anything against it, but it was Russia who derailed it. So Donald, punish Russians. How Donald can punish Russians? Donald is like a big buffoon who is running from one place to another. I'm going to put sanctions. I'm going to put tariffs. I'm going to put this. I'm going to that. What Mexico told him, just to go to F yourself. And the same whole world is now trying to realize that all this is much ado about nothing. All his threats and all this posturing, the tariffs, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Oh my God, what a spectacle it is. It's and once it will start unfold, and it will start unfold as soon as January 21st. So we're still, less than 3 weeks away. You'll see how it all will collapse.
I got Medgar Evers here. Yes. He was murdered in June of 1963. Beckwith went on trial twice.
Right.
In 1964, all white juries deadlocked. So he got off put back on trial in 94, convicted, sentenced to life, died in prison after 7 years.
That's what I thought. I thought he died in prison after he had been convicted many years later and everything. But one of the things we talk about on the network and everything is this whole notion of the kiss the ring. And apparently a lot of folks were going down there to kiss the ring of Trump before he goes into office in less than 3 weeks. And apparently one of those was Mark Zuckerberg. And already he has done something to show that he is an ally of Trump. So Meta's Nick Clegg, who was a UK deputy prime minister and was involved in Meta, he's their global affairs president, has been replaced by Joel Kaplan, who apparently is a heavy in-house Republican. So maybe that was one of the things that they negotiated, was that he would give him some more favorable coverage if he put this person in power. So I know that both you and Jim and Sasha study the stock market. So was this one of those moves where somebody is trying to win favor by kicking somebody out and putting somebody else in that might be more favorable to him, since there was that whole notion of censorship before, but apparently Mark Zuckerberg has kind of acquiesced to some degree?
I have 200 shares of Meta. Let them prosper and make some money for me. It's not my very big bet at all, but still, the way shares are quite expensive, so even 200 shares cost me a bundle. So let them succeed, whatever they're doing.
Well, you can't. Apparently, you can't buy courage. So even though Zuckerman has billions, he's still kowtowing for praise.
But Jim, admit that this is. Okay, one thing, whether he has a lot of courage or not, which I don't care one way or another. But another thing is the responsibility to shareholders and stakeholders of public company. And of course, now that at least for a very short period of time, I'm estimating it maximum 6 months, Trump and Elon Musk and all this group of people, I don't have any nicer word for that. I have a lot of worse words, but not so these people, they are very influential. It will take time when it all will start rolling apart, but right now they're influential. So especially knowing how vindictive they are, they can break even the huge company like Meta. They can start investigations and on state level, on the federal level, and bring some people in Europe to start their investigation and so on. So practically, they almost have no choice as to get on their knees. And it's not only Zuckerberg, but many others who are running substantially sound business. Get on their knees, kiss their hand, and be nice for next few months at least. Once all this machinery will start falling apart, then it will be a different story. For a time being, on your knees, kiss the hand.
It's a smart play, but it's not. It lacks integrity as far as I'm concerned. But as you say, you have a responsibility to your shareholders. So.
Well, and speaking of integrity and everything, one of the places that was in the news in 2024, I'm sure it's going to stay in the news in 2025, was the Middle East. And the Middle East has got two things going on. And one of those power players is Syria. So there's a Syrian delegation getting ready to visit Saudi Arabia for their first foreign trip since they ousted their leader. And one of the things that they did, which apparently we've done a couple of times, is this whole notion of trying to govern what's in the schools. So recently, as a matter of fact, it looked like it happened today, love poems were axed from schools under Syria's new extremist curriculum. So they went from being nationalist to Islamist, and they are definitely having some very strict things that they're going to do in their school curriculum. So if you're planning to go to Syria and write a love poem, that might not be something that goes over all that well and everything, because they're going to be a lot more stricter under their new government. So what is our thoughts around this notion worldwide of this kind of censorship, whether it's in schools or whether it's in the government and everything along those lines? So I know that that's a big issue for you, Jim, because I know you're not a big fan of censorship in general. It even comes up, I think, in your book.
I don't know if we're anyone to talk now, because we're putting 10 commandments in the schools, and so it's one of those things where you point a finger at somebody else and there's multiple fingers pointing back at you. so we have to clean up our own act before we can tell anybody else how to run their countries. And I do think that any kind of extremist government is something that makes me sad. And if they want to, you think about, not only will art and artists be damaged by this kind of thing, but women's rights will be non-existent. There's a lot of downside to this, but whatever you want to do in your personal life as far as your religious convictions, I think that's fine. But I hate to see it used to punish people. And the average citizen is probably going to be. They were very upset with the previous regime, but I don't know if they're going to be much happier in the current one.
Well, one of the things that's happened, and this comes to you, Rick, and everything that was not the norm in the past, was that whenever this happened, whether it was in Syria, whether it was in the United States, or whether it was in, it could be in Greenland or any part of the world, and everything along those lines, it was a very small community that knew about it, and it wasn't as worldwide kind of like outrage. But apparently there's even an outrage on the online community around this change in Syria's school curriculum, just like there's an outrage about what was going on that I mentioned at the beginning of this segment with what's happening with Australia and that sexual assault and abuse case and everything like that. So the online community seems to make the world a much narrower place. So if there are bad things that happen, you hear about them, and there is some outrage. Now, whether that outrage leads to anything.
California, yesterday, with the new year, California is now enforcing some new censorship laws. You can't make AI pornographic images of real people. And so there's a whole new world of censorship. There's the old censorship where, you have religious censorship, political censorship, but now people are trying to figure out what to do about the wave of BS and porn that's just being generated by AI. And, we've seen, people being driven a little crazy by all the propaganda on social media. So there are a bunch of new angles on what should and shouldn't be censored.
Definitely a lot of that going on and everything. Hey, Sasha, what's your take on, because like I said, that war has not been going on as long as the Ukrainian war. It started actually almost a year and several months ago with that horrible attack that took place in October of not last year, but the year before and everything. How long because you can kind of give a prediction of what's going on in the Ukrainian war, how long would this conflict in the Middle East last, particularly with the Middle East being so destabilized, whether it's Hezbollah, Hamas, apparently ISIS, because even ISIS is being blamed to some degree for that Sugar Bowl attack, as well as the attack at Trump Towers and everything. So how destabilized is that region, and how long will that war last in your predictions?
Well, both Israel and Ukraine, they're fighting the same enemies. It's Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China, although not openly, but quietly, of course, they're supporting this alliance. But China, in its wisdom, understands that eventually that alliance will be defeated soundly. And because they depend so much on trade with the West, US, Western Europe, etc., they cannot afford to take an open stance and say that they support this alliance. But they do in some devious ways. Now, result, Israel will end up all rivalries in the Middle East in this 2025. It will completely destroy Hamas, Hezbollah, probably Iran as well. Actually, Iran is not, but you know what is in Iran? The internal forces may actually overtake the rule of Ayatollah and all this nice people. So maybe Israel doesn't even have to do much about Iran at the end of the day. Ukraine, okay, there was a war which ended on December 31st, 2024, and there is a new war started on January 1st, 2025. Ukraine went into the attack. They have developed absolutely magnificent forces, very, very mobile, very speedy
Drones?
boats. It's a drone boats. It's a combination of drone and boats, and they have using the missiles to hit at helicopters which are trying to follow them. And so they destroyed all the commanders of one of the armies in the Kursk region, and they completely destroyed it, and they acknowledged that. And they're asking Russians, okay, come in, show us what you're going to do about it. You have nothing to do about it, because now Ukraine, I think they got a lot of weapons from United States and Europe in the last few weeks.
Yeah,
So now
Biden knows what's going to happen, so he made a special push at the end of his administration to help.
okay, so now we are talking about that maybe Trump figured out that unless Ukraine will become much stronger and much more successful militarily wise, he would not be able to get any peace agreement anytime soon. But even with this efforts, I think that the war will continue well into 2026.
Yeah, Sasha, along those same lines, it looks like another small country, because there's even been some news reports that are saying that they have found a way to counter-attack Russian sabotage, which is basically to seize some of the vessels that are involved in that. So Finland is not exactly a big country, but they did manage to seize the Russian-linked tanker that was suspected of cutting those undersea cables. So maybe Finland is going to be another small country that is not going to take kindly to Russia and its advancements, and is finding its own ways to counterattack. So it sounds like Russia's got more than just Ukraine as a problem, but they might have Finland as a problem on another part of their front. So what is your take on Finland being more aggressive? Because a lot of times people think of Finland, Sweden, Switzerland as being more neutral countries, but I guess they're like, no, we're not going to let somebody else dictate what's going on in our situation.
Well, Finland has appearances of a small country. Now, from military point of view, it's very strong military, and they have experience fighting Russians or Soviet army more than once. And although they were forced to go into neutral foreign policy, and there was even a terminology called Finlandization,
Right.
Which means you're an independent country, but you have to comply with your grandiose neighbor
Neighbors.
and never say a word against. And Russia destroyed all that by itself. That as a result of this war in Ukraine, both Finland, which has a huge borderline with Russia, but also the Sweden, which has been absolutely no, they were not demilitarized, but they were neutral for last probably around 200 years, since they lost the war against Russians in Poltava, Ukraine, in was it the end of 18 or beginning of 19th? No, I think it was the end of 18th century. They lost the war, and they actually agreed never fight any wars with anybody. So even that ended. So now, what's happened now from January 1st, it's another date why situation in Ukraine and Russia is completely now different, is that Ukraine disallowed from January 1st any shipments of gas to Europe. So, and that includes, by the way, the Republic of Dniester, which was used to be a part of Moldova, but then Russians sort of sent their army there, and it became some kind of independent republic. But now it's independent republic without gas. What kind of republic is that? So now Slovakia is going to be without Russian gas, and I think Hungary probably. That's the end of it. All Western Europe, they already cut off the Russian gas. And by the way, the Russian company Gazprom is about to become bankrupt. Company that just a few years ago was recognized as the first company in the world that would become $1 trillion company is now going to be a bankrupt. Bravo!
And so we had Nick in the background. Maybe he'll join us if he's not overly busy and everything. But what is that going to do to the gas prices coming out of Europe? Because one of the articles that I was hearing and reading, and I've read several of these over the last couple of days, was talking about how the European gas prices would be soaring. I know that every time, usually around the time that we just came out of, which is Christmas and Thanksgiving, that is always a concern around American gas prices. But I'm wondering, how big is it going to be an issue for those folks that are traveling around Europe with the gas
I don't
prices?
think it's going to impact them. They are fully prepared for this eventuality. And as Sasha said, Western Europe is already without Russian gas. So I don't think the Western European states will see any difference. My question is I wonder what Kim of North Korea feels like. He sent his elite forces to help Russia, and Putin used them as cannon fodder. He just said, well, if 10 Koreans die, as long as they take out one Ukrainian, then I'm happy. And so, I mean, for goodness sakes, that's kind of a slap in the face. There's supposed to be this alliance, but I'm not so sure it's going to last.
And nobody expected that Koreans, they're using a lot of alcohol, including vodka, and they are just, it's enormous burden. Russia doesn't have even so much vodka to use it for Koreans, because they can die without vodka just as well. So why would you spend so much vodka on them?
Why waste the vodka?
It's sad. It's sad what they've done to them.
It's very sad and everything. Just really quickly, and getting off of that just for a minute, and Rick, maybe you got some thoughts around this. Are we about to have, and I know Jim and Sasha will have some views about it, because we've kind of alluded to it before, and I mentioned it on a couple of news stories, this idea that Musk is not satisfied just dealing with United States politics. Apparently he wants to deal with German politics. He wants to deal with some of the other politics around the world. So I don't think, except for, I mean, there have been attempts way back in history, if you want to look at Napoleon, and if you want to look at Charlemagne and a number of others, but are we trying to have a world emperor in the sense of Elon Musk? Is he trying to become the emperor of the world? And I don't think we've ever had a total world emperor. We've had definitely some dynasties that controlled a lot of the world, but they never tried to control the entirety of the world. So is Elon Musk trying to become a world emperor?
No, but he's pretty impressed with himself. And,
I guess that's an understatement.
And he's got more money than anybody else on the planet by like $100 billion. So he's got a lot of leverage. And so people listen to him. He got in trouble for supporting a German far-right political party.
Yes, he did.
And Die Welt, which is a big German publication, just published Musk's editorial in which he defends that support of, a fascist-leaning party. So, he's
Well, Musk doesn't believe in democracies. He does believe in authoritarian rule, and I don't think he makes too many bones about it.
Because the time that he was raised, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know he's South African. Wasn't he raised under apartheid South Africa? So wasn't that the environment that he was raised under and everything?
Well, his parents apparently have pretty unsavory political beliefs. And he's made some gestures in the direction of disavowing those beliefs, but people like to say that he doesn't really disavow them.
Yeah. I was always curious about that, how tied to the old apartheid government he was, or his parents were, and I never did get any concrete answer from people that are in those kind of lanes.
And I don't know the guy. I just read his tweets, but to me, he seems a little like Trump in that I think they're both lazy thinkers, that they just kind of embrace their thoughts of the moment. I think Musk is a little bit more systematic in his thinking than Trump is, but both of them, say some crazy crap or can be talked into crazy beliefs by the people around them.
Well, speaking of crazy beliefs, and I mentioned on the last story, I forgot the name, but I think it's Maximus or something like that. Does this mean that President-elect Trump is going to change his name? Because apparently his best bud is changing his name on Twitter from Elon Musk to this other title and everything like that.
Cicius Maximus, which is somehow a reference to, I don't know, Pepe the white supremacist MAGA frog that a lot of MAGAs use. It's all sad and goofy and it's double sad because the guy has so much sway.
Hey, I got a question for you, Rick, because you worked for a while with Jimmy Kimmel. I know that there was a question asked earlier this morning whether Jimmy Kimmel was going to be stepping down and everything like that. But there's been a lot of political fodder that the talk show hosts have had, whether it's been Colbert or Jimmy Kimmel. So how much fodder are you expecting to come from Trump in the sense of how much jokes they're going to be able to get? You are a former writer for Jimmy Kimmel.
I worked at Kimmel during the Michael Jackson era, and it was exhausting. Michael Jackson's troubles went on for months and years, right. And it's exhausting to come up with jokes on the same person, the same subject, day after day. And now we're in year 9 of frickin' Trump. So I would guess that the late night shows, they'll make fun of Trump's worst excesses and his dumbest stuff, but they must be desperate to find other stuff to talk.
New material, right?
Yeah, they got
to find plenty of material, though, Rick, because they not only have Donald Trump now to play with, you have Elon Musk. Yeah. I mean, you got to.
It's annoying. Like Jimmy Kimmel is a good Catholic guy. I think so is Colbert. Mm-hmm. And these guys have a strong moral framework, which you maybe wouldn't believe because Jimmy helped make The Man Show. But even on The Man Show, Jimmy acted in a highly moral way. The Man Show was girls on trampolines, but it was also making fun of men. And it's a pathetic situation when late night talk show hosts are have more moral strength than the people who run the country.
Well, that's a good segment into like the paying tribute to President Carter.
Yes,
dying on his 100th birthday, making a lot, lived long enough to vote for Kamala Harris, and is there a better ex-president than Jimmy Carter? I mean, he was for civil rights, human rights.
He helped build 4,000 houses. He wrote 32 books. He taught Sunday school for 50 years.
Yeah, and so there are leaders that are stand-up people and good moral men, but sometimes, like if inflation goes crazy, you're going to get thrown out. And these are things that history looks back at and says, well, that was one heck of a life well lived. So here's the Jimmy Carter.
Yeah. He was a nuclear engineer, and there was a nuclear sub where the reactor was melting down. He went in there with a couple other guys and stopped the meltdown and was exposed to brutal radiation for 89 seconds, exposing him to a year's worth of radiation in a minute and a half. The guy did a lot. And yeah, he made some crap decisions as president, and he had some bad luck.
Yeah, he definitely had some bad luck and everything. Hey, this is actually for everybody on the panel. I remember, I think it was during the pandemic, there was a whole incident in Texas. I think Rex Lee talked about it and others did, about the power grid and the problems with the power grid and all along those lines in that part of the world. And then on New Year's Eve, we had a whole power grid disaster around Puerto Rico and everything like that. So a lot of people were not getting to celebrate the way that they would have liked to in Puerto Rico. So how concerned are you as individuals and fellow panelists about the power grid around the world? And is this going to be a major issue in 2025 where maybe there are infrastructure problems, including our power? How's the power grid in Spain and how is it in Canada and other places?
To tell you, in Spain, there hasn't been any problem. That has not been an issue. The only problem we've had is weather in Valencia, which they're crying about because even today it hits the news every day. What happened? There were unusual floods, and it destroyed a lot of cities around Valencia, literally wiping out killing hundreds of people and wiping out a lot of cities. Now that was an issue that took place in Spain.
So one of the biggest, well, I don't know if it's a threat, but the biggest eaters of power is AI.
Mm-hmm.
And so I expect
Bitcoin.
that, and it'll only eat up more power as it gets more powerful, which means that the AI companies will set up their massive server farms, places where there aren't a lot of people, and they'll power them via nuclear reactors.
Yeah, and we've seen that trend also, and that's one reason I think that we're not so concerned about Russia is that in Europe, France has moved toward nuclear power, and Spain, a lot of the Western European countries have become more and more independent from Russian oil, or frankly anybody's oil, which is a good policy, because it's not like Russia, it's Saudi Arabia or any country can hold you hostage to your energy. So they've moved in Western Europe, become more and more energy self-sufficient. And the United States, of course, should follow that. Right now, the United States still produces a lot of oil. I mean, they're still oil-based, but it's going to take time to transition over into.
Well, one thing Jimmy Carter did was put sun roofs in solar panels into the White House roof, and of course, Ronald Reagan took them down. But
really?
Yeah.
Well, I read about that. It turns out he left them up for 6 years. He didn't take them down until they needed to redo the roof for maintenance. So,
okay.
But speaking of Jimmy Carter, there is a person that whose family was an ally of Jimmy Carter. I'm not saying he was an ally, but definitely the Kennedy family in a lot of ways were allies. And we got some interesting news. I wish Dr. Patmos was here in terms of the medical news and everything like that, because apparently more children are getting kidney stones, and experts think it's because of their diet. And I think that even Jacoby might have alluded to it earlier. The neurovirus cases are surging, particularly over there in Central Florida, which is a highly contagious stomach bug, and all along those lines. So this is at a time that we've got RFK getting to come in as our health czar and everything. So are we needing to be worried by some of the things that are developing health-wise when we've got RFK getting to step into the office and everything, and we had this whole pandemic a few years back and everything? So there's even a fungus outbreak that has sickened hundreds and left one dead around Michigan. So there might even be an outbreak of fungus as well.
So in my house, we're not allowed to talk about who's fat, because that's fat shaming.
Right.
But I watched the Rose Parade yesterday because my wife and I worked on the floats for a couple hours one day just to have something to do. And I watched the people in the parade, and it was interesting, like entire towns, like Fresno, all the kids from Fresno were fat. The kids from Chicago were skinny. The kids from Denmark, pretty skinny. So yeah, we got a lot of fat people in this country. RFK, we can hope that he is thwarted in screwing up our vaccination system. But if he does something about, getting people to, I don't know, somehow not be so fat, but also that means he has to stay away from Ozempic, which I think he's come out against Ozempic and in favor of discipline. And it's bullshit that a guy who was addicted to heroin for 15 years, it talks about discipline. But if Ozempic out there, and if RFK can persuade people to eat a little better than maybe, net positive, I don't know.
Well, for the poor people
in Europe, they have no problem with fat shaming. In other words, in Spain, the first thing I did is I got hit several times from the insurance agent to my doctors. Every time I come in, you're overweight, you're obese, you need to come down. And I give them some BS. I go, well, this is the way it is in America. It goes, no, it isn't. Okay, you guys are just way overweight. It's a universal problem, and you need to lose weight. They just hammer you over here. They don't let you get off like they do in the U.S. that fat is okay. Over here, fat is not okay. But again, life expectancy here is 84. In the United States, it's 77, because you got a lot of fat people who, frankly, they're going to die earlier. I mean, that's kind of like
we can't be insensitive to the fact that poor people get empty calories, and their source of food is usually not nutritious but has a lot of calories that don't make them feel like they're not hungry. And this kind of food, it's in fast foods, and those are affordable. And
speaking of fast foods, that part of the unemployment figures and everything are oftentimes fast food restaurants. They're also, as we mentioned earlier, part of the immigration community. But we got some good news in terms of unemployment. Apparently, U.S. unemployment claims fell to 211,000, the lowest level since March. So maybe more people are actually going back to work, whether that's in virtual work or whether that's in work in offices. But I guess more jobs are taking place. So 2024 looks like it was a good year in terms of U.S. employment. And I think that was a trend around the world and everything. So maybe we'll see.
That's been true throughout the last 4 years. The unemployment has been low. Wages have gone up. But inflation, the price of eggs seems to be resonating more with people than the fact that the economy itself has been fantastic.
Well, people feel better about inflation and prices now that Trump is coming in without any change in the actual numbers, which says that, people are voting, for their team and rather than on the basis, so.
Yeah, they haven't seen any proof yet of
I
what.
think it's not the bread and the butter. It's frankly housing prices.
Mhm.
Well, that's also
and if you look at it, that's the real
affordable housing is been a problem, and it's a chronic
definitely
problem.
not unemployment. As an employer, I can tell you this: unemployment being really great sucks for employers like us, because I have a hard time hiring people. We're trying to hire a lot of people out of Salt Lake, and we're chasing people down to get them to work for us. I mean, really,
we're not crying a river of tears for you, though.
Oh, you should be, because the thing is, I'm trying to make hefty profits off of employees. Come on, Jim, so I can be rich. And the thing is, it's not working out. When you guys are making
we know what your motive is, Nick.
really
Well, speaking of motives,
to get more.
speaking of motives, and speaking of the
immigration, we need cheap labor to come in here so I can hire them.
If anybody wants to go in with me to buy strip malls and convert them into housing, I'm game for that. I looked it up, and there are enough abandoned and half functioning strip malls in America to convert into housing for 700,000 people.
Rick, have you been talking to the mayor of Durham? Because that's literally what at least two projects are. Because I know that just down from my cultural center that I work at, that used to be a strip mall that they're converting to housing, and there'll be some other kind of things there as well. And it's across from a housing unit. And one of our more popular malls, Northgate, is that's one of the proposals to make that into an office/apartment complex as well. So you must have been talking to the mayor and seeing what's going on.
I called my brother, who's in finance, and I said, "What about this?" And he said, "Yeah, no, real estate is a tough business, and anything you can buy is stuff that wasn't bought by the insiders and the people who know what they're doing." So,
Yeah, it's not that easy, because what you're talking about is very capital intensive business, Rick. Number one. Problem number two is that it makes a difference on your purchase price. I mean, people that have bought, like I have millions of dollars of real estate, bought and sold sometimes on an annual basis, that the real problem is when you do acquisitions, if you don't acquire it for the right price, it doesn't matter. You have the best idea in the world. It ain't going to work. And the thing is, you're talking about something very capital intensive. Most greedy capitalists today, they don't want to get in capital intensive business like that. They don't want to do like what Sasha does, go to NVIDIA and trade very liquid stocks. You can get in and out, rip out a lot of profits, and go to Aruba. So I have to commend Sasha.
Sasha's doing great. He had a great vacation.
You guys remember Holmes Stoner? You remember Holmes Stoner? Holmes Stoner had a plan for
You don't make money by doing hard work.
No, hold on a second, folks. I want to hear what Holmes Stoner's plan was that Rick was going to bring up. Hold on.
Holmes Stoner was on the show for a while, and he had this idea, and it all worked out. He could build homes using cheap steel. And the problem was they were going to be affordable, livable, comfortable places where you can live a life of quiet dignity. And the problem he had was the regulations were for wood structures.
Right.
And so he couldn't get the certifications to build these homes in the United States. So it's just one of those things where crazy regulations, and I'm not saying, all regulations are wrong. Of course we need regulations, but these stood in the way of a very good idea that could have changed the affordability issue that was crushing.
It's a very high risk, high reward business, but let me tell you about the high risk. 40 years ago, I used to build what they call med center plazas. They still exist. If you ever go down to Naples, Cape Coral, I invested and built a lot of these. Now, the concept was quite interesting. You have a medical doctor, a veterinarian, a pharmacist, and a chiropractor all under one roof.
Shopping one place.
And here's the key, because you always have to have a little to make it work. What you needed to do is get a loan to build it. So you went around to the doctor, you went to the chiropractor, went home and said, look, if you sign a lease, I will front you like $50,000. And these greedy doctors, they'll sign leases for that. So you had it all leased up, like no kidding. So we'd have these properties all leased up. Then we went to the bank, and guess what? They'd loan us all the money, because why wouldn't they on a leased up property that hasn't been built yet? And that's how we built up the med center plazas around South Florida. It worked well until there was a recession. And this is, you can't stop it. And all of a sudden, bang, the real estate market in Florida froze. So like I say, for a long time, I was just printing money, and then all of a sudden, bang, building $1 million properties and printing money.
It's not all that easy. Hey, Nick, coming back to
difficult business.
It's a very difficult business. Coming back to
going to win in real estate. I
coming
like
back to
what
world
Sasha
politics
does.
just for
Get
a
in, get
minute.
out, make a lot of money, trade NVIDIA, and screw trying to fix the world. And
Well,
help
I
the
have a
world.
warning about the tech stocks. I asked my brother, is Trump going to do something crazy and tank the market? And he goes, maybe, but what are going to get hit? He goes, traditional stocks, blue chips haven't moved that much. So they didn't go up much. They're not going to go down much. What you have to watch out for with Trump is the tech stocks that have exploded in value. Now, Sasha probably has more insight into that.
I don't think that I have any insight at all. What I've noticed is that in the last couple of weeks, maybe 3, all tech stocks, but not only tech stocks, they were all going down. There was hardly a day when they would go up. They would even start the day that the futures would have been highly positive by the beginning of the trading, and it would start higher and it would end the day lower anyway. And that appears to me that it's a usual trick of separating investors with their money. Really, what's going on? Because so many people bought this, specifically tech stocks, on margin and are borrowing money and so on. So
Get
they
rid of those guys.
take, you see, they have to build up their inventory. I'm talking about the investment houses, market makers, or so on. They need inventory. How they get? Oh, today is the beginning of a new.
My tech stocks are all in the green.
No, it's only today. It's already beginning of January. I'm talking about last 2-3 weeks.
Yeah,
yes.
Very specific. So basically, the technology is very simple. As the day starts or in the progress or so on, at one point, somehow there's no conspiracy. It just appears to be a conspiracy when all the market makers on the major stocks, they are taking down all their bids. There's still offers here and there, no bids. So even if you sell 100 shares of Meta, the next 100 shares will go $3 lower, and then another $3 lower. So no bids. Okay, something interesting happening today. So they figured out that probably by now all the weak hands are out of the market. They've been washed out. They've been dealt with. The margin calls, they get to bring more money. Some of them sold their furniture and so on. So now, once it's been done, now the market is free to go, free to shine. Maybe not right away, like straight up. Maybe it will have a couple of down days.
Look at the fundamentals. Look at the revenues. The revenue going to dry up.
But
Trump do
that's
anything
where
about
you-
the revenues? No.
But Jim, that's where you go to make money. Because I'm just going to tell you a little story, which 2 of the chess players will appreciate, and Rick will appreciate also. You're wasting your brain unless you do pattern recognition on stocks as opposed to on Rubik's cubes and Raven's matrices. I'm going. That's interesting.
That's called a doofus trap.
Yeah, that's a trap. It's like chess. Bose Weinstein had done really well on that. But here's my little chess story for the day, which Sasha will appreciate, and so will Jim E. So I recruited the top chess players back in 1976 to win the Pan American Intercollegiate. My recruits were Larry Christensen, well-known grandmaster, Ron Henley, well-known grandmaster. The other three people who played on the team was myself, Frank Murphy, and Dennis Stearns. Now, here's what happened. Larry and Ron became chess grandmasters. Myself and Frank Murphy, we became attorneys. We actually practiced law for the law. And Dennis Stearns went into investing. And what he did is he acquired assets under management, they call it. And all he was into stocks. Today, Dennis has $2 billion. You can look it up, Stearns Financial Group. He shows up every year on this to do a introduction about, he'll be on early this year about showing his projection for future. Look at Stearns Financial Group, $2 billion under management. Now let's do a little math. He's got $2 billion under management. He makes 1% a year off his $2 billion. That's his basic asset under management. How much does Dennis make every year?
20 million. Add up to real money.
20 million. 20 million.
20 million a year. Okay, so financially, who was the most successful? The two chess grandmasters, the two attorneys, or Dennis Stearns?
The guy who didn't fall into the doofus trap.
He didn't fall into the doofus trap. The first two guys became grandmasters, and everybody goes, oh, they're grandmasters. The other two idiots, and I'm one of them, became lawyers. Oh, great, they're lawyers. The last guy got his bachelor's degree and went immediately into stocks and now makes 20 million a year. If he sat on his butt, he makes 20 million a year. The thing is, every one of us fell into the doofus trap because we weren't trained like he was. Go directly to the market, acquire as much assets much as you can.
He did.
Do it over a period of years, which he did.
Speaking of acquiring assets, I learned today that we can acquire an asset. It'll be a wonderful asset for Pod TV because there's this thing called the public domain. So for those of you that are fans of things like Popeye and Tintin, they are actually in the public domain now. So we can actually air Popeye on the Pod TV as well as Tintin. And there were a couple
we can run Popeye cartoons on Pod TV. Is that what you're saying?
And we can run Popeyes.
And
you can also, it turns out, make pornos with them. If you want to have Tintin make love to Popeye, nobody can stop you now.
Now, whose mind went there? Whose mind went there?
We can do AI with Popeye and Rin Tin Tin, apparently. No, just create your own Popeye, Rin Tin Tin movie.
Popeye and Tintin, not Rin Tin Tin. Let's be clear. Tintin was the one that was a different character that was more popular in other parts of the world and less popular here. But Popeye was very popular and continues to still be popular. As we get to wind down, I did see some news from our Asian front. Apparently, North Korea's Kim has vowed the toughest anti-U.S. policy before Trump takes office, and China's Xi is vowing to stop something called mass killings. Stop mass killings that are known as revenge on society crimes. So I guess that they were doing some mass killings of folks that were not going according to what they wanted to do in their society. And South Korea adoptees and families are rocked by fraud allegations. So we know that whole notion of human trafficking and adoption can be played into that human trafficking. There's a whole fraud case that's about to take place out of South Korea and everything. So that's going to be very ugly and everything. And last but not least, and y'all might have some thoughts around this, the world population, even with the pandemic, on New Year's Day, which was just yesterday and everything, it was expected to be 8.09 billion people. So that's what the world population was expected to be. So we didn't quite. So it sounds like we had this pandemic. It sounds like the world population has still been going up and everything.
The pandemic only wiped out like 5 days worth of babies, really. Right. I mean, it only knocked the population down by 5 days worth of growth. I want to go back to strip malls for a sec. Here's my genius plan for strip malls. So boomers have all the money, and there's a ton of them. It's right in their name, baby boom. So you turn strip malls into senior living on the upper floors. On the bottom floors, you have restaurants and businesses that look like they're from the 80s, back when boomers were young and vital. You've got like an 80s disco, and a boomer hobbles in on their walker, and hot ladies on staff treat them as if they're 30 years old instead of 80.
Rick, I've got bad news for you because that was actually an article I saw on one of my Facebook feeds or one of my feeds. Apparently, disco is coming back. So disco is making a comeback. And all of those, there have been several reports about this, that even some of the clubs and other places are starting to make a comeback. So apparently, disco is, even though there have been whole documentaries about it.
Cry because that was my prime. And that,
yeah, me too.
Disco was girls. Yeah,
I couldn't talk to girls, but I could dance with them.
That's right.
Some,
Rick and I are right there.
So apparently disco is making a comeback. So you and Sasha, everybody can get our disco shirts and everything and get ready to go out disco into. And then disco finally also got its due in a book. So by a former Detroit Free Press staff.
My dad owned a dress store, and he had a seamstress, and I'd get all my clothes tailored Travolta style, so they'd nip in at the waist, and I had my fry boots for extra height, and
you just still couldn't close.
I couldn't close. I got half a hand job out of it. Really was my.
I had the notorious, and Rick, you'll be able to identify with this. It was a green shirt that had the cut in it with the black leather, so it was like the little black leather.
Oh, nice.
A popular disco shirt.
I had the cowboy. I had the tailored cowboy shirt with the pearl snap buttons and the gabardine, the tight, stretchy Angel's Flight pants. And I would sleep in my weight belt to train my waist to be as skinny as possible, because that's how you did disco business.
So hold on a second. I've got a question for Sasha. Sasha, when you were in the Soviet Army, I got it right this time and everything, and along those lines, was that during the era of disco, or had you already moved to Canada by that time? Did you ever fall into the Canadian? Did you ever fall into the disco trap and the popularity of disco? And was it as popular in the Soviet
Union? That was Rick and my generation.
No, in Soviet Union, it was too early for disco, and they didn't have that dance. They had all kind of dances like waltz or say polkas, or some kind of traditional dances. Disco, I was already in Canada when that crazy stuff hit things, but I think it was fun. The music was at least much better than in quality, in quantity, than music of today, when there's
Donna Summers.
a lot of noise and very little music. Anyway, but that's unfortunately the times we live.
Was your Netflix recommendation Black Doves? Was that the one that you said to watch?
I recommend it. Which one?
Black Doves.
I like Black Doves. I recommend it.
Yeah.
What I recommend these days, it's absolutely fabulous movie on
What's
Netflix.
The name of it?
By the name Maestro in Blue.
Okay.
It's been around for a couple of years, the first two seasons, and I saw it at that time, and well, it was an interesting story, but I was always busy with something else. I could play chess at the same time or read book, and in the meantime, just following what's happened there. Okay, so that's happened. So that happened. Now I saw it that the third season coming right now, and I decided to see it, but by mistake I put it the first season, and I started to see it now without getting busy with distractions of all kinds, and I found this absolutely amazing movie, great scenery, great music, great actors, the storyline. And then I saw it for second time or time and a half, the first two seasons, and then I saw just yesterday, so third season. I can tell you, it's a fabulous movie. I can't compare it to.
I have two Black recommendations for Netflix. One is Black Doves. It's got Keira Knightley. It's got a high body count. It's a little bit funny. And then Black Mirror. They haven't had a new season in a while, but if you haven't seen it before, it's
totally turned me on to that.
It's a set of perverse stories like The Twilight Zone, except updated for now, where technology goes a little bit bad in a lot of weird, fun ways.
Okay. Yeah, I get my media recommendations on Pod TV because Netflix always put on their top 10, but a lot of them just suck. You know, so I need to.
Yeah, I mean,
I
like
need to
you
get
end
the
up with
Pod
shows
TV
like
top 10.
Hot
They're pretty good.
Frosty, which is where Frosty the Snowman turns out to be a topless guy with abs. It's like, no, you know.
Come on.
I don't need to see that.
Another thing was going on Netflix right now. It's a Churchill at War. That's a 4-series documentary. It's high quality, very well produced.
It's called what again, Sasha?
Churchill at War.
Churchill at War.
Yeah, so I could recommend it. Those, especially those who love history, that very well produced documentary.
Yeah.
Well, Black Dogs is worth seeing if you haven't seen it yet. I mean, they really have really, really good acting that took place in that. Really good script writing. You know, this is where it really.
Oh, The Gentleman is another Brit show that has good-looking actors and actors. You know, and getting up to you know, a few people get killed. It's a lot of fun. The Gentleman. It's The Gentleman. There was a movie called The Gentleman by the same director. But this is a whole different story. And
and I didn't think Keira Knightley could pull it off, but she does. She does a great job in that.
She does a great job. Yeah, it's kind of amazing because I see her in Pride and Prejudice. I always think Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah, exactly.
What was she going to be in the new action hero? I mean,
right. But that's
that notice time to get ready to wrap up. We do have Coco show coming up. You know, it's going to be a rerun for the first one of January, and we'll come back live with her next week since she's having the pleasure of being in one of Nick's favorite places, which is Morocco. So she's actually performing there and performed on New Year's Eve and everything like that. So she's been there for about a week and a half, and I think she comes back. I want to say she told me she was coming back either the day or the 3rd, but she should be back this weekend. So she'll be back live and have all kinds of reports about her.
I have one more recommendation
based
on events. If you can find this movie now, like people who are conspiracy theorist lunatics are talking about MK Ultra and the terrorist attacks. They're saying, oh, these were people who were brainwashed by the CIA MK Ultra program. Don't listen to those idiots. But there's a movie from about 10 years ago called American Ultra, which is about somebody who was brainwashed by, you know, it's a fun movie with Kristen Stewart, and it's got a lot of mayhem. And don't listen to the bullshit, but just watch the movie about the bullshit called American Ultra, which is about that.
On that note, we'll see you on World Edition tomorrow. We'll also see Sasha and his crew on Ukraine, Russia, and China at 11 on tomorrow as well. And of course, we got the recording of the chess show, even though it'll air on Saturday. So all of that will be taking place on tomorrow, on Friday the 3rd. So I'll see you fine folks on a later time. So definitely have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
He hit the button.